I found out my parents used my rich cousin's money to go on a vacation to Hawaii without me when I overheard them talking about it one morning. They weren't trying to be sneaky, they weren't even trying to hide it, and that was the part that stung the most. It was like they didn't even care how much it hurt, how much it made me feel small, forgotten, and completely irrelevant. I walked into the kitchen, ready to ask what was for breakfast, only to hear my mom casually telling my dad about the plans, and how your brother was already packing for the trip. When she said it was all covered by my cousin, I froze in place, half hidden behind the doorframe, my heart racing in my chest. I never thought I'd be in the position to question everything I thought I knew about my family, but there I was, staring at the mess of lies and omissions that they thought they could get away with. "What do you mean covered?" I asked before I could stop myself, stepping into the room. My mom's face snapped up to meet mine, her expression shifting from carefree to something else I couldn't place. She didn't look guilty, she didn't look ashamed. She looked like she was trying to avoid something, and that made my gut twist even more. "Nothing, honey," she said, trying to sound casual. "It's just that your cousin wanted to help out. He's always so generous, and he's been so kind to your brother, especially with all the hard work he's been putting in lately. I mean, he's finally going to have a real vacation, and he deserves it." I could feel the words burn in my throat, and I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So, you and Dad, you're going to Hawaii?" "With him." "But not me?" My dad, who had been quietly sipping his coffee in the corner, finally looked up at me with a sigh. "It's not like that, sweetheart. Your brother's really been working hard, and he's finally in a position to go. He's got a good future ahead of him, and your cousin wants to make sure he gets the recognition he deserves." The words felt like a punch in the stomach. It wasn't even about the trip anymore. It wasn't about the beach or the fancy hotel or any of the things they were going to do. It was the fact that they had made this decision without even considering me. I had always been the one who did the right thing, who played by the rules, who followed the plan. But it wasn't enough, was it? I wasn't the one they were proud of. I wasn't the one they wanted to take on trips. "You've got a job, honey," my mom continued, completely oblivious to the storm that was building inside of me. "You're busy, you've got your career. It's not like you need a break." I blinked, the frustration bubbling up in my chest. "So, because I have responsibilities, I don't get to take a vacation? But my brother, who still lives here, who's been handed every opportunity, gets to go to Hawaii. With my cousin's money?" There was a pause, and for a moment, I thought maybe they would realize how ridiculous this was. Maybe they would see how wrong it was to exclude me, to make me feel so invisible. But no, my dad's response only made it worse. "We're not talking about that right now, okay? Your brother needs this. He's been stepping up more than you realize, and he's showing he's ready for bigger things. This is about him." "About him?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my mouth. "It's always about him, isn't it? You never even asked me. You just assumed I wouldn't care." My mom glanced at my dad, and that look, the one they exchanged when they were silently making decisions without my input, confirmed everything I needed to know. "It's not about us not caring about you, sweetie," she said softly, almost too softly, like she knew it didn't matter. "We just thought you'd understand. You've always been the independent one, the one who doesn't need these things. We didn't want to make you feel uncomfortable." I shook my head, my voice trembling. "Uncomfortable? You don't think I'd feel uncomfortable being left out of the family trip? You don't think I'd feel a little betrayed?" She didn't answer, not directly. Instead, she looked at me like I was being unreasonable, like I was the one overreacting. But the truth was, I wasn't the one overreacting. I was the one who had been overlooked. The one who had been the backup plan, always there but never fully included. My brother, the golden child, was the one they had invested in, the one they saw as the future. I was just the afterthought, the one they could always count on to quietly accept whatever scraps they decided to give me. "Maybe next time," she said, finally giving me a smile that didn't reach her eyes, as if she was already over the conversation. "Now, why don't you go make some coffee or something? We're all going to have a great time, okay?" I stood there, frozen, not knowing how to process what had just happened. How was it possible that they didn't see it? How was it possible that they had no idea how much it hurt, how much their decision had crushed me? I had spent years doing everything right, always the good kid, always the one who never asked for anything, and this was how they treated me. I didn't even know where to go from here. Should I confront them? Should I leave and figure it out on my own? I could already feel the anger building inside of me, threatening to overflow, but more than anything, I felt like I had lost something. Something big. I wasn't just losing a trip. I was losing my place in the family. And no one even seemed to care. It's funny how quickly things can change when you stop pretending to be fine. The following days after that conversation were a blur of silence and tension, but the worst part was that no one seemed to care. My mom avoided me as if I were a problem she didn't know how to fix, and my dad just kept telling me to get over it and understand the situation. My brother didn't even try to talk to me, as if he didn't know that something was wrong. It wasn't until the morning before they were set to leave that everything came to a head. I wasn't sure what I expected, but I know that I wasn't prepared for what happened when I confronted my mom again. It was early, around 6:30. I hadn't been able to sleep the night before, not because I was excited for their trip honestly, the idea of them enjoying themselves while I sat here was a bitter pill, but because I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had been said. The way they had just brushed me off, the way they used my cousin's money like it was theirs to spend, and how they had left me out of all of it without even trying to explain. I was angry. Not just at them, but at myself for letting it happen, for letting it go on as long as it did. But today, that was all going to change. I found her in the kitchen, her back to me, pouring herself another cup of coffee. She didn't even flinch when I entered, as if she expected me. Her phone was on the table, the screen lighting up with some notification she quickly swiped away. I stood there for a few moments, unsure of how to start, unsure of how to put into words the storm that had been building inside of me. When she finally turned around, her expression was flat, like she had already made peace with how this conversation was going to go. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking but controlled, "we need to talk." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she took a sip of her coffee, her eyes lingering on the mug in her hand as if it were the most important thing in the world. "About what?" she asked, finally looking up at me. She didn't seem worried, didn't seem like she was dreading it. I hated how calm she was. I took a deep breath, the words hard to force out but necessary. "About the trip," I said. "About the fact that you're going with him and not with me. About how you've made all these decisions without even asking me how I feel." "Sweetheart, we've been over this," she replied, her tone starting to shift into that patronizing, calm voice she always used when she didn't want to engage. "We're just going to have a family vacation. Your brother's worked hard, he deserves it, and it's just a little break." I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to yell. "It's not just a vacation, Mom. It's a choice, you chose him. You didn't even think to ask me. You're using my cousin's money to make his life easier, and you couldn't care less about how that makes me feel. You don't think that maybe I deserve a chance, too? Maybe I'm tired of always being the one left behind." She set the coffee down, finally giving me her full attention, but her face was unreadable, like she had put up walls I couldn't break. "This isn't about you," she said, her voice suddenly cold. "This is about what your brother needs. You'll understand when you have your own family. You'll see that sometimes you have to put the ones you love first." "Put the ones you love first?" I echoed, my voice rising in disbelief. "What about me, Mom? What about me? I've been here, working hard, not asking for handouts, not looking for sympathy. I didn't need a trip, but the fact that you didn't even give me the option, that's what hurts. You didn't think I would care, did you? You assumed I'd be fine, but you couldn't be more wrong." Her eyes flickered with something guilt, maybe, but she quickly masked it. "You don't understand. You never did. Your brother's been struggling, trying to get his life together. He's the one who needs support. Not you. Not me?" I repeated, this time almost laughing in frustration. "I need support too, Mom. I need to feel like I'm part of this family, like I'm seen by you. But I'm not. I'm always the one who gets overlooked, who gets brushed aside. Do you even care about me anymore? She didn't answer right away, and I saw the conflict in her eyes, the hesitation that flickered just before she buried it. But instead of offering me anything that resembled an apology or understanding, she let out a sigh and looked away, her gaze hardening. You're being dramatic, she said, almost in a whisper. This is just how things are. Your brother is our priority right now. Your priority? I asked, a bitter laugh escaping. Your priority is to make him feel special, to cater to him, to make sure he gets everything he wants, even if it means excluding me. I'm not the one you have to worry about. I'm not the one you have to coddle. I'm the one who's always been strong, the one who never needed anything from you, and that's how you repay me? By pretending I don't even exist when it matters most? I could feel my chest tightening, my anger rising again, but this time, I didn't hold it back. I'm done, Mom. Done being invisible. Done being treated like I'm the second choice. You've spent years convincing me that everything was fine, that I was fine, but I'm not. And I'm not going to sit here quietly and watch you reward him for everything he's done wrong. She flinched at the words, like they stung, but she didn't apologize. Instead, she folded her arms, standing tall in a way that made her seem untouchable. You can't expect everything to be about you, no matter how much you want it. This isn't about you, it's about what's best for the family. Best for the family? I shot back, my voice sharp. That's rich coming from you. You've never cared about what's best for me. You've always done what's best for your perfect little son, the one who never had to fight for anything, the one who could screw up and still come out on top. Well, guess what, Mom? I'm done. I'm done letting you pretend like I don't matter. Her face hardened, the silence between us growing thick, almost suffocating. Fine, she said after a long pause. If you want to make a scene about this, go ahead. You do what you think is best for you. I stared at her, feeling like I was watching the last pieces of our relationship crumble away. The words "I'm done" hung in the air between us, and for the first time, I realized I meant them. I turned and walked away, my heart pounding, unsure of what was next. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally standing up for myself. It was a strange thing, walking around the house after that conversation. Everything felt off, like the walls were closing in, and I was the only one who noticed. My mom didn't try to talk to me again after I walked away, and my dad, as usual, kept to himself, acting like nothing had happened. I didn't know what I expected from them. A plea? An apology? Some sign that they realized they'd messed up? Instead, I got nothing. Just silence. The kind that eats at you until you start questioning your own sanity. But I wasn't about to let it slide. I couldn't. I spent the next few days focused on one thing, finding out exactly what was going on. There was something behind all of this, something that didn't make sense, and I was going to figure it out. My cousin, he had always been the golden child, the one everyone talked about like he was some kind of saint. It didn't add up that he would just step in and pay for a lavish trip for my brother without a real reason. He wasn't that generous, at least not to me. I hadn't spoken to him much in years, but I decided that if I wanted to get to the bottom of this, I had to start there. I didn't know how I was going to reach him, but I knew he'd be at his office downtown. I'd heard about it from my parents a while ago, his new venture, the one that kept him busy all the time. He had built some kind of tech company, a software startup that was supposedly doing well. He had a reputation for being difficult to approach, but that didn't matter. I had no choice. I wasn't going to let my parents or my brother get away with this. I grabbed my jacket and headed out. When I reached the building, I felt a little sick to my stomach. I hadn't seen him in years, and the idea of facing him made me nervous. I wasn't sure what I would even say, but I was determined to get answers. I walked through the sleek, glass doors into the elevator, pressing the button for the top floor where his office was. I was surprised at how quiet the place was. It didn't seem busy. I could feel the tension building, the anger from my mom's dismissive attitude still simmering beneath the surface, and I wondered if this was a huge mistake. When the elevator door opened, I stepped out into a modern, minimalist lobby. The walls were decorated with abstract art, and everything was pristine, sterile even. The receptionist greeted me as if I belonged there. I asked for my cousin, and she gave me a strange look before telling me that he was in a meeting but would be free in about 15 minutes. I didn't know if I was relieved or frustrated. 15 minutes felt like an eternity when all I wanted was to confront him and get to the bottom of things. I didn't know if I could sit still long enough to wait. So I paced back and forth, trying to keep my mind occupied, trying not to think about how ridiculous I probably looked. I was trying to figure out what I was going to say to him, how I was going to explain that I knew something was off, that I wasn't buying the whole generosity act. It didn't make sense. And the more I thought about it, the more it became clear to me that my cousin wasn't just helping my brother out of the goodness of his heart. There had to be something else going on, something my parents weren't telling me, something I wasn't seeing. After what felt like an eternity, the receptionist finally called me over. "Mr. Thompson will see you now," she said, motioning to the door behind her. I nodded and walked in, trying to steady my breathing. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I wasn't prepared for what I saw. He was sitting at his desk, staring at his computer screen. The room was immaculate, everything perfectly in place. He didn't look up when I entered, as if he was so used to people coming and going that it didn't faze him. I cleared my throat, trying to gather my thoughts before speaking. "Hey, it's me," I said, a little awkwardly. He finally looked up, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I didn't know if he even recognized me. "Oh," he said, blinking a few times. "I didn't know you were in town. What's up?" I was taken aback by how casual he sounded. Like we hadn't spent years without speaking to each other. Like nothing had ever happened. I was about to speak when he interrupted me. "Sorry, I'm in the middle of something, but I've got a few minutes." "What's going on?" he asked, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms. His posture was relaxed, like he wasn't bothered by the fact that I had shown up unannounced. It pissed me off, how easy he made it seem. "I want to know why you're paying for my brother's trip," I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended. He raised an eyebrow but didn't seem surprised. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," I snapped. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. You gave my brother money for a vacation. You've been helping him out with everything. What's the deal?" He didn't answer right away, just stared at me for a moment as if trying to gauge how much I knew. When he spoke, his voice was calm, too calm. "I'm just helping him out, okay? He's been going through a tough time, and I wanted to do something nice for him." "Tough time?" I repeated, barely able to keep my voice steady. "What, like the tough time where he's barely working and has never had to struggle for anything? What's going on, because this doesn't make sense." For the first time, his demeanor shifted. He sat up straighter, his face hardening. "You don't understand what's going on, do you? It's not just about the vacation. It's about more than that." My pulse quickened. "More than what?" He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Your parents, they've been hiding something. And so have I. But it's not my place to tell you. I never wanted you involved in any of this." My heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about? What are they hiding?" He shook his head, standing up and walking around the desk. "You need to leave, all right? You're better off not knowing. Trust me." It hit me then, something was very wrong. But what? What was he trying to protect me from? What were they all hiding from me? I stood there, my mind racing, trying to process what my cousin had just said. The words "you're better off not knowing" echoed in my head, and for a moment, I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. What could he possibly mean by that? Why was he acting like there was something I wasn't supposed to understand? I had come here looking for answers, but now, I felt more lost than ever. "I don't get it," I said, my voice shaky as I struggled to keep my composure. "What are you talking about? You can't just drop something like that and expect me to walk away." He sighed heavily, running his hand through his hair like he was trying to figure out what to say next. Look, this is complicated. It's not something I can just explain in 5 minutes. Your parents, your dad, especially, have been hiding things from you for a long time. And I've been trying to help. But you're better off staying out of it. Trust me, it's not something you want to get involved in. Hide what? I demanded, unable to keep the frustration out of my voice. What are they hiding? You're not making any sense. He hesitated for a moment, looking around the room as if trying to decide whether or not he should continue. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. Your dad's been struggling financially. He has been for a while. The whole trip, your brother's vacation, all of that, it's his way of trying to keep up appearances, like everything's fine. But it's not. It's all falling apart. My mind raced as the words settled in. My dad had always seemed like the steady one, the one who held everything together. I couldn't imagine him struggling with anything, least of all money. He had always been the one to lecture me about how hard work would pay off, how I had to be responsible with my finances. I couldn't fathom the idea of him hiding something like this from me. What do you mean, falling apart? How bad is it? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. He shook his head. I don't know all the details, but I know enough to understand that your dad's been in a lot of debt for years. And I think he was hoping that no one would notice. But it's gotten worse. Your brother, he's been covering for him in his own way, paying off some of the debts, using the money he's gotten from his company. That's why he's so willing to take that vacation. It's his way of keeping up the facade, like everything's fine. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. All this time, I had believed that my family was perfect, that we were fine, that we were doing well. But now, my whole view of everything was crumbling. I looked at my cousin, disbelief written all over my face. Why are you telling me this now? Why didn't you say something earlier? He sighed again, rubbing his temples as if the weight of the situation was finally catching up to him. I didn't want to get involved. I didn't want to make things worse. But when your brother started acting like everything